I am 54 and my wife is 56. I never thought I would be on any forum, but never thought my marriage would fail. And I even thought it was my fault. So here we go. My wife and I were married for 19 years before I discover she was cheating on me for how long? I don't know. Needless to say, I was devastated. We don't have kids. She had fertility issues and we even tried IVF, but that didn't work. I do well for myself. I own quite a few vending machines and a few ATMs here in North Carolina. My wife works for Walmart. She's an assistant store manager. And for those of you that don't know the salary for a Walmart, assistant store manager can go over $70,000 per year. She is making just under that. We never had any communication issues. Both phones were open to each other and she wasn't really big into social media either. But as time went on, I noticed she would bring up an old friend of hers from time to time telling me what he did. Basically telling me a play-by-play of his life. I thought, why in the hell is she telling me all of this? It didn't dawn on me at the time, but that was a red flag and I should have taken note of it. But no, I didn't anyways. I didn't heed the subtle warning and life went on as normal. Both of us working. We still had date nights and our sex life was still decent. I also noticed that she was talking more about expanding our sex life into threesomes. Keep in mind, when I dated her, she never spoke of this nonsense. Fast forward. One week I received a text from my wife saying she was going to be late, coming home from work. They had inventory and inventory is a big thing at Walmart and she usually doesn't come home until late. Okay. No biggie. I told her I would see her later and that I loved her that night. I went to bed around 11 p.m. and she still wasn't home yet. At about 1:30-ish in the morning, she still wasn't home. I found that surprising. So instead of calling or texting her, I drove to Walmart. Keep in mind, it takes about 15 minutes for me to get there. So as I pull into Walmart at first, I didn't see her car. I kept driving around to the back. I still didn't see her car when I didn't see her car. I paused for a minute to gather my thoughts, but I didn't stay. I drove back home. It was just after 2 a.m. and she hasn't called or texted. So I called her but she wouldn't answer the phone. So I sent her a text asking her where she was and if she was okay. It took about 15 minutes for her to finally respond, saying that she was at a friend's house with some other male coworkers and they were having drinks. That did not sit well with me. I asked her why she did not tell me she was going to someone's house. She got upset at me for asking her and I told her that I was insensitive to not let me know where she was, that she was a married woman and that this has never happened. I confronted her and asked her if something was going on between her and one of the guys and she started saying I was trying to be controlling. I told her that I was not trying to control her but wanted to know the truth. She said nothing was going on. She wanted to go hang out with her coworkers after dealing with inventory. She finally got home around 4 a.m. and she crawled into bed reeking of alcohol. I didn't say anything to her. I am not the type of man to accuse anyone of anything without evidence. I was left feeling suspicious of what happened that night. She has never done anything like this before. And I didn't know who the guys were that she was with. When I left the house the next day to check on my ATMs and check on my vending machines, she was still asleep and I didn't say anything to her. I knew something was going on and it had to do with our conversation about expanding our sex life into threesomes. It made me question if she was looking to go outside of our marriage for sexual gratification or even more as the day went on. My wife was texting and calling, but I didn't respond. I wasn't ready to talk to her. My mind was still racing from last night. Later that evening, I was home and she came in and apologized for not telling me where she went. She said she got drunk too fast. And when she told me that, I told her that wasn't smart. I told her she was lucky she didn't get pulled over. She also said that nothing happened with any of the guys, but I still wasn't convinced. We talked about it more and I told her that I would divorce her if I found out she was cheating on me. Fast forward a few months and everything is going well when I call or text. She responds and we have tried to be more open and communicate as much as possible. A few more months passed and I started to notice that she was putting her phone face down and it was suddenly password protected. I didn't say anything. I kept it to myself and waited to see if my suspicions would be proven right. A couple of weeks later, as I was going through the phone bill, I noticed she was texting a number that I'm not familiar with. I mean, they were texting a lot, thousands of text messages and calls, and there were text messages and calls on the night. She didn't come home until the next morning. At that point, I started digging. I went through my phone contact list and bounced it against a phone bill. I didn't tell my wife anything. I wanted to find out everything on my own. She would probably deny any acquisition anyway. So over the next few weeks I started snooping as much as I could, emails on the computer and old phones we had, but I didn't find anything. Everything was in her phone, which all of a sudden I couldn't get into, even though I didn't want to. I decided to hire a private investigator after giving the private investigator my wife's phone number and all of our other information. We talked in detail about the divorce laws here in North Carolina. He said I could go after the person that messed up my marriage. I even gave him a copy of the phone bill. That's a law I wasn't familiar with, but soon found out what it was is called alienation of affection. Basically, a third party destroyed your relationship. About a week later, the private investigator asked me to come into his office. He had some information for me. Boy, what he had made me mad as hell. The first thing he showed me was my wife leaving her job 1 to 2 hours before her shift ended. Don't know how she pulled that off and meeting some man at his house. She would stay there until she had to come home, which usually coincided with the time she was coming home from work. Second, on 2 other occasions, the private investigator followed my wife to this guy's house and one other man showed up at his house after my wife did. Guess who greeted this guy? My wife, and kissed him. Needless to say, that's all I needed to see. I had a private investigator prepare all of that for me on a flash drive and I thanked him for everything. I left his office and went straight to the attorney. He referred me to, gave him the information and had him filed for divorce right away. On this day, my wife sent another text saying she was going to be late, coming home from work. I didn't respond because I was on my way home to get my shit and get out. I called my brother and told him, and he was just as angry as I was. I told him I am coming to stay with him until I can find another place to live. And he said, take as long as you need. I went home, gathered some calls for the next few days and left. Got to my brother's and got settled in. To my surprise, I never got a call or a text from my wife. I figured she would blow up my phone when she noticed I wasn't home, but there was a reason she didn't call. She was in jail and she got arrested for a DUI, which sort of delayed the inevitable. But she bonded out before she had to go to work later that day. She called and left a voicemail and wanted to talk. I never answered her calls or the text messages she sent. I didn't stop anything. She was served later that day with divorce papers at Walmart. Fast forward 2 months and the divorce hearing is upon us. My wife's attorney tried to get me to pay spousal support and give her the house and part of my business. When my attorney presented my evidence of infidelity, the judge said she wasn't getting any alimony or the business, but he ordered us to sell the house. There wasn't much equity, so I wasn't worried about that. We bought the house less than 2 years ago when the divorce was final. My attorney and I talked about filing a lawsuit against my ex-wife's AP for alienation of affection. Fast forward another 3 months, the house has sold and the ex-wife got about $15,000 from the equity. I got about the same right around the same time the ex-wife got arrested for another DUI. A second time she had to pay a fine due community service and 2 months in jail suspended. We talked a few times after the divorce regarding the house, but any time she would try to talk about us, I hung up the phone. Also, my private investigator found out who her AP was. He was divorced and he owned a restaurant in the area. My lawyer and I went ahead with the lawsuit against my ex-wife's AP for alienation of affection. And that's what I am waiting on the court date for that. If I come back with an update, I will send Tony an email. I frequent these forums including Reddit, but I never posted because I was too embarrassed. Then I came across Tony's channel, some of the craziest cheating stories I have heard. And now I am sharing my own crazy cheating story. I have to say he has one of the best reading voices for these stories, but sometimes he puts me to sleep. Sorry, Tony. I only mean. Well, thank you again. I was married for 19 years and the reason I acted so fast, I am 54 years old and I am too old to put up with that crap. I worshipped the ground that woman walked on. I am in a much better place now.